Moving on then to the next speaker, Professor Peter Francis, Deputy Vice-Chancellor at Northumbria University, and also Carly Foster, Assistant Director of Student Engagement, again at Northumbria University. They will speak to us on addressing the evaluating student retention interventions. So, Carly and Peter.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the introduction. It's very nice to be here with everybody. I hope you can see my screen. That's very good. Okay, so what we'd like to do today is talk through our approach to assessing and evaluating student retention interventions. Some of you may have heard a little bit of the work that we've been doing already in relation to student retention in various different conferences. But what we want to do today is really also just talk through the impact that those interventions have had, and we'll do a double act as best we can. Just to recap where we started from, our research into this has taken place over a number of years now, and so we've tried to build a project which has been based on firm foundations. First of all, through high quality research and evaluation, and this slide really just talks through the ongoing work that Carly and I have been involved in to ensure that we've brought some rigor, some academic rigor and some real detail to the project. Secondly, it's been strategically aligned to some core outcomes of the institution. So we have a KPI on retention. We also have a very clear set of business outcomes, all looking at how we can improve student retention and engage better with students at all levels of study. And thirdly, it's been really delivered through a partnership with Civitas Learning, and we would really like to suggest that it's been through research and development, which has allowed us to develop this. You may ask just really, what do we mean by learning analytics? And I think it's just hand over to Carly to say a little bit more on that.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. There's loads of terminology for what is meant by analytics, not just in higher education, but in all sectors. But the landscape is particularly confusing sometimes in higher education, because you have terminology such as learning analytics, academic analytics, learner analytics, and they're often used interchangeably. So I thought it was just useful to briefly say what the development of the reference for analytics depending on where you are in your stage of your journey. So the four key elements of learning analytics tend to be posited as the measurement, the collection, the analysis, and then the reporting of student data. But that definition is about 10 years old now, and it doesn't really reflect the gains that have been made in the research that Peter and I get involved in, where we've started to move not just about the data itself and what can be understood from it, but how to act and how to make sense of it in a way that really gets to the heart of a growing context of personalisation and personalising the student journey. And so certainly over the last 5 or 6 years, that space has become far more embroiled in the process of actually getting closer to learning and getting closer to the student experience, and moving away from just data to through the descriptive analytics phases, prescriptive and predictive analytics. So what we mean, when Peter will show you the next set of slides, is we're not just talking about the data, we're talking about the processes involved, the people, both staff and students, the policies that you've got to put in place around it to make sure that the analytics has the best chance of being successfully embedded within your institutional and your student culture.
Thank you very much indeed, Carly. And colleagues may have seen this, we've used this many times before, but it's our approach at Northumbria to educational analytics. It brings together a variety of people, systems, data, processes, and policies at the bottom, and it drives for us a set of outcomes at the top through a variety of different measures or mechanisms. We've called here them theories of change, whether they're institutional analytics, academic analytics, learning analytics, or learner. One that we are currently looking at how we develop further is adaptive analytics. But ultimately, in simple terms, it's about using data from a variety of different areas and processes and systems, and analysing that and developing a series of nudges to our students that hopefully connect them to interventions and create a greater degree of relationships. And we've always said that whilst this project is about data, it's actually about delivering greater relationships with the institution, either student to academic or student to service, or both. The project's taken about 5 years to develop. It's gone through a series of pilots and evaluation levels. We are now in 2021. We have a set of various different types of challenges that are facing us in relation to COVID or mental health and isolation. We'll say something about that at the end. But on the right-hand side of this slide, you'll see where we started off in relation to our undergraduate retention rate and the sector completion rate. And you can see that it wasn't a particularly pretty picture that we started with, and certainly something that we knew we had to tackle, and particularly within an organisation where we have somewhere in the region of 23,000 students on campus and about 1,500 academic staff. One of the questions for us really was, how do we create a personalised, effective intervention for our students? In relation to learning analytics, very clearly what we set up was a nudge approach. So this is the way in which we designed it. So we have the data feeding in from a variety of different sources. We have a set of risks that we sort of work through, and we have a set of nudges that we write out to students via email, usually tailored, and it's worth saying all with student consent. So everything that we're talking about today, our students consent at enrolment. They have the opportunity to withdraw, and students also have the opportunity to engage. And I think this year, about 80% of students consented to be engaged with our educational analytics project. You'll see also from this slide that the nudges can come from high levels, so myself or other members of executive, faculty, pro-vice chancellors. They can come from personal tutors or programme leaders or heads of departments, or they can come directly at a more individualised way from student progress. But all of these are then focused around particular time slots over the course of the academic year, focused upon what we know about the challenges students face, what we know in relation to our data tells us about when students might be thinking of leaving, or when anxiety or isolation might be higher, etc. So we use this nudge timeline, this design framework, to help us move through that. Carly.
Thanks, Peter. So it's probably worth at this point talking about what we mean by a nudge and what that personalisation really is. So what Peter's just shown you really is the design phase of our learning analytics process. And it really, with any intervention, you can have the best design in the world, the best designed intervention in the world, but if it doesn't get to the right people, it's not going to be effective. So there's a real emphasis on not only designing a good intervention, but targeting it as well. And so this is how we use analytics to really target the interventions that we've designed. What we're seeing on the screen here is what's called a paired predictor plot. So along the x-axis on the chart on the right, we're seeing a credits earned ratio. So on your right-hand side of that chart, you've got students who pass everything that they attempt. So they've got 100% credits earned ratio. And on the left-hand side of the x-axis, you've got students who have failed everything that they've attempted. And there's a spectrum that we adopt for that. Similarly, on the y-axis, you've got a GPA, cumulative continuum there. So at the bottom where it says 0, that's a low academic performance, and at the top you've got high academic performance. And what you can then do is start to create student personas and student profiles, whereby in the top right hand corner, this is students who are passing everything that they attempt, and when they do pass it, they pass it well. We call those academically thriving students. You've then got students who we would say are striving, so they're passing everything, they've got great momentum, but they're not necessarily getting the higher academic marks that they could be getting with the right support, and a different type of support to the students who are in the top left-hand corner, who have got great marks when they do pass things, but they don't pass everything, and actually that comes down to a lack of momentum and potential setbacks. So setbacks are one of my favourite groups of students, actually, because they tend to have real life challenges, as it were. It's not that they can't or they don't want to meet the deadlines, but they're not necessarily organised to meet the deadlines. Potentially it's because they've got childcare commitments, they're working, they're studying part-time, studying at a distance, and they have fundamentally different challenges to the students who are in the striving category, but both need an intervention to become academically thriving students. And then finally, we've got students in survival mode who are not passing everything. They don't have very much momentum, and also the grades that they get when they do pass things are fairly low. So that's a different conversation again. So what we do is we write nudges which are designed and tailored to these students, and then we find academic voices or service voices who we think the student needs to hear from at that particular time. So Peter, if you could just click, please. This is an academically thriving nudge sent from a head of department in sport. And really what you can see here is the emphasis is about recognising and positively encouraging the student. It's worth noting that the analytics we use is not sort of deficit. We make sure that we're talking to everybody and engaging with everybody. Similarly for striving, it's about quickly and clearly signposting ways to engage. The next, for those students with setbacks, it's about recognising that they're having setbacks, normalising it, and understanding, making sure that you can empathise with those. So particularly with this nudge, we said, I know it's sometimes frustrating when you feel like your engagement doesn't pay off, but remember that's like many things in life, and actually university is here to nurture your resilience. And then finally, the one to students in survival modes are far more direct and overt personal offer of support from the faculty. And because you can't make that support offer to every single one of our 23,000 students, because it's physically not possible, being able to target it to the students who you think need it most is really the power of predictive analytics.
Okay, thank you, Polly. I'm conscious of the time now, colleagues. So really the question then for us is evaluate. So what we really will do now in the next few minutes is to talk through the impact that this has had on our retention scores. So, Carly.
So in the evaluation, it's really key to understand what happened after we sent those nudges, and this really just does try to give you a bit of an overview of some of the tracking that we've done afterwards. So of the 909, we got 909 students right back to us. We sent thousands and thousands of nudges, but of the 909 who came back, 174 of those students needed multiple interventions and multiple referral points. But just because of time, I think the highlights here are very much that we can see which students got disability and dyslexia support as a result of some of the nudges that we did around the start of year. We know which ones accessed it, and we know what the success rate of those students were compared to the students who didn't access the support. So we're not only evaluating the initial intervention, that initial nudge, and its ability to get the right students to a second intervention, which we can also then evaluate. But we can share this data with you in more detail. From a qualitative perspective then, as well as the descriptive data that we've just shown, students really value this approach, and certainly Peter can speak to some of the responses that he gets from students when we write nudges on his behalf. But they actually take the time to thank you for the recognition and validate a lot of what we're doing here, because we work at a profile level, but it's nice to have it come back on a personal level.
So we've driven more people we've driven more people into our services. We have students that are coming back and talking well about what we've been offering. And what we also have is a model of success in relation to our retention levels. So if I click through here, you'll see that where we were has now changed, and you can see that there's an improved retention score for our students over the course of the period of the project, which is good evidence, I think, that we have more students in services getting the right intervention. We've got students writing back and saying that they value the work that we're doing, and institutionally you can see that it's making a headline impact in relation to our retention levels. And that's allowed us to take the project on, knowledge that our theory of change can work if we connect the right inputs with the right data and the right outputs to deliver the outcomes. And Carly and I will just say very, very briefly now in the course of a minute the types of activities we're taking this on to now.
So one of the activities that we've got is about sharing this data and being transparent with the data, trying to encourage agency and really encouraging students to use the data directly for themselves and make their own interventions. So this is an applet that we've built in our NU Connect app, where students can reflect on their well-being, track their academic engagement, get data fed to them about how they're engaging with the virtual learning environment compared to their peers, etc. And then we've done some research really on it to understand why students then engage with this type of activity and what they get out of it. And we really found that there were sort of 4 reasons for students adopting analytics in this way. They use it to orientate themselves academically. Some of them use it just to improve the organisation and management of their actual study habits, as this isn't actually embedded within the academic learning, it's sort of extracted, as it's called. They also use it to then signpost, and they expect to be told what services are on offer as a result of the data that they're seeing. And also they just generally do find it quite fun, in a way of just another way of engaging with the university and their programme. So this is something that we're looking to roll out for students in terms of staff and really empowering academic staff. We have a very successful model called the subject surgeries, where we bring together data from across the platforms that we have, and we have really in-depth, useful conversations with heads of subject about setting targets and trends for retention, understanding what uplift is required, and it's not the same in every discipline, nor could the expectations of how disciplines necessarily perform can't be homogenous either. So we take a subject level view, and then we not only say this is the ask, but we also say this is how we think you can deliver it in terms of your subject level trends, what's happening at a subject level, but also who are the students who we think would most value talking to their faculty right now. And then that creates an action plan at the end where we can monitor and track the progress of those interventions in the faculty.
Okay, thank you. And then the final 2 slides, and I'll go through these quickly, is where next. So one is around student mental health analytics. We are supported by the Office for Students on a major multi-partner project, looking at how this approach can then work with our student body to support improvements in thriving, in well-being and in mental health. And we have 3 work streams on suicide prevention, helping students in difficulties, and supporting a thriving community, and talking very much about distance from thriving as a way of understanding student health and well-being. And we're also looking at how the model works in relation to COVID. And Carly, you may have something to say here.
Yeah, sorry, I keep going on mute because of the background noise. The thing with analytics and the predictive analytics is it works very much on historical data and historical trends. And because we're seeing such cataclysmic changes in behaviour in 2020, what's also really important is what's happening to students right now, and how their personal lives are affected by lockdowns. Are they able to engage in an online or a blended way? Do they have access to the technology? Do they have childcare commitments, work commitments? And how does this change their impact of feeling part of the community? And how does that change again for new students and continuing students? So Peter, if you could just click here, this just shows you how we've integrated some of that data by collecting at the point of enrolment. And then what you can see here is a snapshot of our analytics platform, which brings together the students who don't feel part of the community today, and they've told us that at enrolment or have since updated their student portal to tell us that. They also are not available to engage online from today, which is a big thing because we're going to lockdown tomorrow, and we can also see what their prediction is like. And then we can really narrow down to 28 students in an institution of 23,000 who need a conversation with us today about what's happening with them tomorrow.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Sorry that sounded quite a rushed presentation. I hope it provides some evidence not only of what we've done, but the impact of what we've done. Happy to take some questions and provide any further information from those of you who are interested more about our work. Thank you very much indeed for listening, and sorry we're a little over time.
Okay, thank you, Peter, and thank you, Carly. Just time for one question, I guess, and it's really a question on qualitative data. Do you have any qualitative data which can assist in understanding the effectiveness of, let's say, the nudges in terms of, let's say, case studies or student feedback or anything of that kind?
Do you want me to take that, Peter?
Yeah, and then I can say.
So we have what's called a student influencer forum, and we meet regularly to discuss the nudges, because one of the important things about nudges is that a nudge from last year isn't applicable to a nudge this year. It's not content that you just churn out on a timeline and it never changes. So what we do is we meet with the student influencer forum. We take the data analytics and the segmented profiles, work with them on the nudges, intervene, deploy, and then we come back and we use the same forum to understand what the actual impact of it was. And so it's a continual cycle of improvement with that, really. We also have representation from the Students' Union on our Educational Analytics Board as well, and they feed into key decisions not only about the nudges and how they land, but also on the policies around consent and deploying as well. So I think that's important to note. In terms of the analysis and the research that we've done on how students engage with their own data, that work was all qualitative. That was all in-depth interviews with 20 students over a longitudinal piece over the course of an academic year, to understand their motivations for engaging with their own data.
And the work that we're doing with the OFS is very much about co-creation of the process.
Great. Well, thank you both.